ignorance in this case is not bliss. That the less we know about ourselves, the more we're actually in a box. And the more we become aware, the more we become empowered. Because when we're not aware, we're not conscious of why we do the things that we do. We actually stay stuck in these boxes.
Hey everybody, welcome to Finding the Upside. I have with me Mandy Keene. Hey Mandy.
Hi everyone, happy to be here.
We are doing a super special episode today where I am getting super vulnerable and letting Mandy read live my assessments that are up on understand.me. And Mandy's going to tell you a little bit more about understand.me, and then we're going to get right into the live read so you can see how this all plays out. And I'm the guinea pig. I can't wait.
Yes, and thank you, Maria. This is very brave of you because you say it's vulnerable, but it is very vulnerable because this is where we're talking about your gifts and your strengths, which you might think, why is that vulnerable? But it is. It's vulnerable to talk about what we're powerful about, what we're gifted in, and it's also vulnerable to talk about what is our kryptonite and what is much more of a struggle to us. So I'm so excited because it's liberating when we do that. And thank you for being brave. Thank you for being courageous, because my hope and intention is to inspire others to be as brave and vulnerable as you are.
Oh, thank you. Well, I definitely enjoyed taking all the assessments. And what I also love is that you can see them all in one place. And that is something that is really fascinating, to see them all there and be able to look at them and compare them. So I can't wait to hear your analysis.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Well, I always want to give credit where credit is due. I am the geek of understand.me, and I've always loved assessments. I've been studying assessments for the past 25 years. Understand.me is not my original vision. It is the vision of my dear friend and mentor, Russell Brunson. Yes, Russell, we got to give thanks to Russell. He came to me. He was like, Mandy, I have an idea. And I'm like, what? And he was like so excited. He's like, what if we did like Facebook meets assessments and we combine them all and it's all in one place? I'm like, that sounds amazing. Can we do that? And if you know Russell and you say, can we do that? He's like, psh, if you imagine it, yes. And so here it is. It was Russell's vision. So I'm so grateful for him and his vision and his courage in making this happen. Because this is why we get to have this conversation.
Yes, absolutely. I love it.
Are you ready to dive in?
I'm ready.
Okay. So before we dive in, I do have a couple of disclaimers I love to give people when it comes to assessments.
Okay.
Especially for those people who aren't used to assessments. And you said something interesting, as you said you actually enjoyed taking the assessment. I wish everybody did. I've had some people where some people have had negative experiences with assessments, or they have a block to taking assessments. And so I just want to extend some compassion to people who have some resistance to that, or they have some skepticism. The number one objection that I've received when it comes to assessments is, I don't want to be put in a box. And here's my response to that is, if you're open, I find that ignorance in this case is not bliss. That the less we know about ourselves, the more we're actually in a box. And the more we become aware, the more we become empowered. Because when we're not aware, we're not conscious of why we do the things that we do. We actually stay stuck in these boxes, right? So for example, 25 years ago, what got me involved in assessments is I didn't know that Mandy should never do admin work. I didn't know that, right? I didn't know that Mandy should never do work that requires a lot of detail, cross the T's, dot the I's. So you could say that I was limiting myself and I was putting myself in a box because I was ignorant about who I was. And when I started taking assessments, I realized, oh, I'm not stupid. Because guess what? Guess what happens when we're not aware? We put ourselves in the worst boxes ever. I started putting myself in the stupid box, right? Like, oh, I'm not good at this. So therefore, I'm stupid. Like, have you ever had a job or ever done anything, Maria, where you weren't good at it? And
Yes.
then you attach a meaning and a story
Yes.
to it. Those are the boxes that are the most destructive, toxic, and dangerous. And so it was assessments that actually liberated me from putting myself in the box of, oh, I'm stupid. When I took assessments and I realized, oh, no, it's that I'm not designed for that. Just like a penguin is not designed to be in the desert. We are not designed, we're not all designed to do the same things. And so I always like to share that first. And I always like to give the disclaimer that there's no assessment on planet Earth that could ever encompass the depths of who you are, the mystery of the human soul, and the potential of what you are capable of. I like to use assessments as like a puzzle piece, just like it's like a tool to put together. So now, would Maria like to see her profile?
Yes, please.
And if I say anything, Maria, that doesn't resonate with you
Okay.
or is confusing,
Okay.
please let me know, because that usually sparks an interesting conversation. As you know, being my client, I joke that you didn't call the 1-900 psychic hotline. I can't read your mind. So if you don't tell me, I won't know. And so it's always helpful. And there's always room for error in assessments. They're not always perfect. But what's interesting, and this is what I love about understand.me, is you'll see that there is a correlation. Da-da-da. Okay, can
Awesome.
you see?
I
Can you see
can.
it?
I can.
Yay! Yay, okay. We're not going to just because for the sake of time, we're not going to dive deep into each of these.
Yep.
But I want to just quickly, cover, we'll touch on them. And then you can share with me what you would like me to focus on.
Okay.
I happen to know you, Maria, so I want to be transparent with the audience that I know Maria. But I'll share with you what jumps out at me when I look at your profile, and what I find that is fascinating when we combine them, right? When we combine these results. So, you being a high DI, we already know that you're very extroverted, and that also matches, right, this ENFP. Because look at so if you guys know DISC, you know that the D and the I is more extroverted, and the S and the C tend to be more introverted. And then if you ever want to know, well, I wonder how extroverted she is, and you look, whoa, she's 73%. That's pretty extroverted, right?
Yeah.
And so that tells you a lot right there about you.
Okay.
Oh, right. And so you are big picture thinker, what's really interesting, and I'm going to bounce around. Is that okay? I'm going to bounce around on all of these because I like seeing how they all interconnect. So what's interesting is so much of this, you are the ultimate big picture woman, big picture, because connectedness, your number one strength of connectedness, people with connectedness, they are the ultimate big picture thinkers. And so D's are big picture. Your number one value is impact. You're driven by making an impact. Like, I've got to make a difference. ENFPs are campaigners. They really care about people, and they're curious about people, and they want to lift people up. 7-wing-8 Enneagrams, they're the enthusiast, right? 7-wing-8's the realist, because you're not afraid to actually be more bold than the 7-wing-6. But the 7 itself is the enthusiast, right? And so it's like you have this right away, what I can tell, like if I didn't know Maria, right away I would see, wow, this woman is like, she wants to make a big impact on humanity and big picture. And when it comes to like I can just by glancing at your profile, I already know your kryptonite is the minutia little details that get in the way, right? Like a power cord to your computer, right? It's like because you live in big picture land. That is your superpower, and you're a visionary with that. ENFPs are the ultimate uplifters. Something that a lot of people don't know about Myers-Briggs, otherwise known as 16 personalities, is it was created by, it's got a beautiful backstory. It's created by a mother and a daughter who really wanted to empower people to find what they would be good at for their career. And campaigners are the ultimate uplifters. They're the ultimate ones that inspire people. And you got your 7-wing-8. There's no one that's more enthusiastic than Enneagram 7s. Like Jim Carrey is a 7. Robin Williams is a 7. Most comedians are 7s. Dave Lindenbaum, who I work with Understand.me, is a 7. No one makes me laugh harder than Dave Lindenbaum. So like they're the enthusiasts. So you have this enthusiasm. And then we look at your values. Your number one value is you've got to make a difference. So that is like what drives you. What's really beautiful is that what I like to look at is I like to look at people's values and I like to look at their strengths, because that tells me a lot about how in alignment they are with themselves. Because what's interesting, because Understand.me is still a baby, right? We've just launched and we haven't put enough profiles together, and I haven't done enough readings. It'll be really interesting 5 years from now, and it'll be really interesting 10 years from now, what I can be able to report and say. But I will tell you this, is I'm already discovering is the people who are really lost. They're like, I don't know who I am. I don't know what to do. What I'm finding is sometimes their strengths and their values are they don't make sense. Like they're not matching. And that tells me that they're not in alignment. So that tells me that it's kind of like, if I may get a little deep here.
Yeah, sure. Go
All
for
right.
it.
I'm going to get a little deep and a little weird. People know me, like if you know Mandy always gets a little weird. Okay. It's kind of like the Matrix, where sometimes people think they should value something that's really not their authentic value. It's really not what's in their heart, right? It's kind of like the kid that was raised, you got to be a football player because I was a football player and your grandpa was a football player and you got to be a football player. But he really doesn't want to be a football player, but he signs up for football because that's what he thinks he has to do, right? But it's not what's in his heart. But he's too scared to upset dad, and he's too scared to stand up for himself because he doesn't want to lose that love and that connection. And so I'm finding that with some of these profiles, when I look at people's strengths and I look at their values, that if they don't align, then there's something off. They're not really being honest with themselves. And there's usually some trauma there. It's usually a sign of some trauma. And that's an opportunity for some work. What's great with you is I look at you and I see alignment, because your number one value is impact, which is making a difference, which is you are driven by the need to know that your work matters, that you are truly legit helping people. Like you're not just saying that as a marketing campaign. You actually have to believe it in your heart of hearts, in your soul.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And here's something fascinating. Do you know much about strengths?
I've only been introduced to it through taking this assessment and then breaking it down in another training I went to. There was a little exploration about matching your strengths to what you're doing. But that was my first exposure, and that's only in the last 3 months.
Okay. Okay. Well, I'm going to get into it for a little bit, but I've been talking. I get excited. I've been
I
talking
know.
for a little bit.
That's all
Has
right.
anything I've said, like, has it resonated? Do you have any questions? Do you have any
Yeah,
comments?
I'm so
I'm
glad
going
that you asked
to
me that. Yeah, I'm so glad you asked me that, because the one thing I'm going to say, I mean, first of all, for anybody who's listening or watching, I was exposed to assessments early on in my career. Like, my company did DISC, and so I did that many years ago. They had us all take that. Obviously, Myers-Briggs, I never took that one, but that was like kind of the gold standard years ago in my corporate, management, arena, and then in that industry and corporate. But so I've been exposed to them, but what I would say is I have learned the most about myself now, taking all these different ones and really getting a deeper understanding about them. And obviously today is transforming that as well, right? Because as I took them and I'm reading them, things are resonating completely, everything you're saying. But what really came clear in this moment is that the reason why I felt so out of alignment working in corporate is because I felt like what I was doing had absolutely no impact. None. None. And so I'm glad you're saying that things are in alignment. And I'm glad you kind of articulated that for others, because that was real for me. And it was only through coming out of that. It wasn't like I was like, oh, I'm out of alignment, let me fix this and go do something else. It was the natural, path of what happened in my life, and losing my job and then starting a business. And I guess I started unknowingly following my instinct and my intuition of what I was meant to do. And as you know, that's been an evolution that's become even more powerful. But it makes a lot of sense why I felt not aligned, in that previous life working in the corporate world.
Yeah, it's so important. Thank you for sharing that. It's so important to, I'm going to say something that's going to sound so ridiculously simple, but it's really powerful if we become aware of it. Whenever I get a client who is sad, depressed, unmotivated, like that's a common one, like, I'm not motivated, Mandy, motivate me. And I'm like, okay, it's deeper than that. It's about, one of my favorite quotes is Socrates, know thyself. Part of knowing thyself is knowing what drives you. And the first thing I do with the client is look at their values. Because when we're not honoring our values, we become depressed. It's really that simple. When we're not, it's our fuel. It's like our soul food. If we're not, and not everybody, here's what's tricky about us humans. So you and I both, I mean, one of the reasons why you and I jive so well and why we get each other so well, not just because I've coached you, it's because we both have the same top two values. So we're like, we get each other. Um, um, when people have different values, it's almost like you're an alien from outer space, right? Like, I coach a lot of people whose number one value is utility. Um, and it doesn't mean that you're better or worse than. This is where the number one conflict in arguments and what starts wars and what gets people riled up is values conflict. Because whatever we value, we truly believe this is how I'm supposed to live life. The mistake is when we believe this is how you should live life, right? And so now that you're aware of it, now that you're conscious of it, you know that what Maria needs and requires is that you have to believe that you're making an impact. It doesn't matter. I remember, I think I've told you this story before that, I had a sales job where I was making a lot of money. Um, And people were like, oh my gosh, Mandy, you must be so happy. And I was miserable because I knew I wasn't helping people. I was like, yeah, I was doing this sales script over and over and over again. I felt like a robot could do it. And I didn't even believe in that much of like this program that I was selling. And it didn't matter the money I was making. It didn't matter to me because my soul was like, I'm not making the difference that I know I could make. And so that's what I'm talking about is, and then when I went back to coaching and I took a huge pay cut, oh, I was so happy though. I was like, oh, I'm doing what my soul came here to do. I'm in alignment. And so I think this is so important, especially like for parents to understand their children, like that you have children that have values that are different than you, that they need to honor what is in alignment with them.
Mm, that makes sense. Could you explain something that I'm seeing here with
Yes.
the top two, the way they're ranked is impact and freedom, right?
Mm.
Which that makes a lot of sense for me. Tradition is ranked number 3, but the score is lower. So what does that mean?
Good question. I know this gets a little confusing. I'm going to make it super simple.
Okay.
So it's like you have another value. Okay. So we didn't want to complicate it on understand.me. So it's almost like there's, so we have, impact, freedom, tradition. It's 4, 5, 6, 7, right? There's seven
Yeah.
values.
Yep.
So it's almost like there are 14 really values, because what happens is your tradition is so low that it creates a new value. So it's ranked number 3. So people who are low traditional, what this means for you is that you're a rebel.
Oh, now I see it, because I see the description is discipline to follow the rules and laws of your beliefs. Yeah,
Rebel.
I would
You're
say
like,
rebel. Rebel
yeah.
is more my vibe.
If I were to give a word to low traditional people is, well, I would say probably open-minded. So people who are high traditional, so I've had some clients who are high traditional. My ex-husband was high traditional. People who are high traditional, they are very disciplined. I have a lot of respect for high traditional people because they believe this is how you're supposed to live life. Right. And they believe, so it could come across in religion. It could come across in spirituality. It could come across in CrossFit. There's so many different ways it could come across in politics. Right. And so they really believe passionately that this is how you're supposed to live life. And they're very, very disciplined. And I do find that highly traditional people are very reliable with what they believe. And so there's a lot of respect for that. And I find that when people are hiring, when I'm coaching my business owners, and I say, when you're hiring someone and they're high traditional, you want to find out what that is so that you respect it. Because if you might accidentally offend them, right? Where you don't mean to, because they're so passionate about it. And so it's good to have like your antennas up and be aware of it. So people like you and I, who are more low traditional, we're like, hey, you do you, I do me. And we're more open-minded and we're more flexible, and we understand that there's so many different ways you can live life. And so there's not one that's better or worse than. There's pros and cons to each value. There's a bright side and a shadow side to each of these values, right? But if your score is so low that it ranks you higher, it basically creates another value. Does that
Okay.
make sense?
Yeah, totally. Thank you for explaining that.
So for you to be happy, Maria, I mean, it really is about making a difference. And you need to believe. So when it comes to freedom, you need to believe that you're free. Like you and I have freedom, but you and I have talked about how we're also very different personalities. What's freedom to Maria is going to look very different than what's freedom to Mandy, right? And so it's getting really clear on what does it look like to be free to you. And one of the things that I want to share with you that I've learned about Enneagram sevens that I found to be so fascinating, and I just have um, just like I have like a sweet spot for you Enneagram sevens because I love to laugh, and you Enneagram sevens are you bring the most joy to the world because you are the enthusiast and you're the ones that are willing to make fun of yourselves. You are the comedians, you're the jokester. But I have a tenderness for you Enneagram sevens because Enneagram, do you know much about Enneagram? I know we've talked about it a little bit, but remind me if like what you know about Enneagram.
I mean, this was the first time I took Enneagram. I know, like, I've been exposed to people talking about what Enneagram they are, and I never understood what all those numbers meant. So this is the first time, but I did do a pretty deep dive in the one that I took. You know, because I've taken it twice actually. I've taken the version on here, and I've taken a deeper one in a training that was offered, and they kind of gave more narrative on what it all meant. So
Yeah. 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 And did it resonate with you being an Enneagram 7 from what you
yes,
read?
yes,
Yeah.
100%.
It's so interesting because it definitely matches you. It matches being an ENFP. Like an ENFP is the Enneagram 7 of Myers-Briggs.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Because it's the painter, it's the curious one, it's the extrovert, right? What I find that I love about Enneagram specifically is it goes to the core of our childhood wounding, which people might go, ooh, I don't know if I want to look at that. Like, yes, you do, because this is how we become liberated. This is how we become the best version of ourselves. I've I've begun to realize that we all want the benefits of transformation, but none of us really want to do what's necessary for it, myself included. Okay, like the what's required for transformation is uncomfortable, even painful at times, right? And what Enneagram does is Enneagram shows us, oh, this is why I adapted my personality this way. And so, Enneagram sevens, you were, and please let me know if I say anything that doesn't resonate with you, Maria. You really, to protect yourself and to survive your childhood, you cannot feel any negative emotions. And you became a master at constantly figuring out how to escape pain. So Enneagram sevens are like the escape artists, and they're just brilliant at knowing how to not feel sad, how to not feel any sort of like sadness, sorrow, even anger, and instead, you know, being playful and joyful. And so that is also why they're so good at lifting everybody up and being the life of the party. But you can imagine just being a human being, if you do that too long and do it where you're not authentic and you don't take care of what's really going on inside, what can happen, right? And so if you see this graph here, and a lot of people ask, okay, so what does this mean? Why is there an arrow pointing to a 1? Why is an arrow pointing to a
Yeah,
5?
yeah,
So with all of us, with every Enneagram type, this is what's so fascinating about Enneagram. And for those who are listening and this is their first exposure to Enneagram, this might seem a little like techno babble, but hang in there, you'll get it. Is each Enneagram type looks like a different Enneagram when they're stressed and looks like a different Enneagram when they're healthy, which I just love. I think that's so beautiful.
Mhm.
So for you and this is like, to me, it's like, this is like our sign. This is our way of knowing and being aware of when you're stressed. So you know how like if your car needs serviced, you get those cute little icons on your dashboard, right? So this is like that, right? You were like, oh, I'm stressed. I need to bump up my self-care. I need to do something, right? So for you, you look like the dark side of the one when you're stressed, which is more controlling. So ones are an anger type, and ones are like, very black and white, and you need to do it this way, and very, very demanding, and they can be condescending, and they can just be very, very controlling and particular. Like, this is how we're supposed to be doing it, right? So you know that Maria is stressed if you're going to that dark side of the one, more controlling. Does that resonate with you? Remember a couple chapters where
Yep.
right?
Yep.
Me too. So I'm a 9, and I go to the dark side of a 6, which is like really anxious. I'm, well, what if this happens? Well, what if that happens? Well, and so that's like, Mandy is stressed when I'm going to the dark side of the 6, and I become really anxious, and I'm worried about everything. I'm like, this can happen and that can happen, right? That's the dark side of the 6. That's when I know Mandy's stressed. So we all have it. It just looks different. Yours looks like the angry, controlling one when you're stressed. Mine looks like the anxious, what if this happens? What if that happens of a 6? So it's just like a different costume that we all have. Now, when you're healthy, here's what's really magical about the Enneagram that I don't think a lot of people know, which I think is like the best part of the Enneagram. Like, I want to shout this from the rooftops. It's the best part. You are the best version of a 5. Like, an Enneagram 5 cannot be a better 5 than you. Did you know that?
No. Why?
Because an Enneagram 5 is going to have the baggage of an Enneagram 5. So they're never going to be able to shine like you, as an Enneagram 7, can shine and have the best parts of the Enneagram 5 without any of the baggage of an Enneagram 5. And so you are when you're healthy, this is when you get, and I've heard you, if I may share, I feel like you'll be comfortable if I share this. I can tell when Maria is in a good space because you start sharing with me about how you've researched stuff and you're geeking out on stuff. So that is the Enneagram 5, because the Enneagram 5 likes to go in their cave and research. And that's when you're okay with withdrawing more and going more into yourself, and you don't need other people as much. And you are going within, and you are geeking out on something that you are passionate about, and you're also focused on it, because 7s tend to be ADD, right?
Yeah.
This and that,
all
this
over.
and that,
Squirrel.
right? Exactly. But the healthy version of you is when you find something and then you dive deep into it. That's when actually you're the healthiest. What comes up for you?
You know what? Like, that has been so validating, just seeing that, and understanding. And I agree with you. Like the I don't know what this is called, not the wings, but the point, the arrows that point to the 1 and the 5, whatever that's called.
It's the healthy version and the stressed version.
Has brought so much. It's validated so much and helped me understand more exactly that. And I think we talked about it once before, like where I was sharing with you, like geeking out on something that I was researching, whatever. And it's like I think the way you said it is like I was going underground, like Tony Stark, right? in the
Yes.
end, right?
Yes.
And it was like,
Yes.
yes, that's what but I never really understood, that part of me. And if you asked me to describe myself like that, I couldn't even articulate it, and, but I saw myself when this gave me the clarity to understand that me in health, how I do that. And it's actually such a great balance. As you said, that's how I feel as a 7. I have so many ideas and I want to do this and I want to do that. I want to do this. But when I can like go deep, wow, that's a whole different feeling.
So for everyone to be able to benefit, will you expand on that feeling, a whole different feel? Notice the words that Maria just used, a whole different feeling. That's so interesting that you say that as an Enneagram 7. Can you expand on that? What do you mean
Yeah.
by a whole different feeling?
Yeah. And I mean, I'm not saying all the ideas isn't energizing because you know me, right? Like having all the ideas and wanting to do it all isn't energizing, but it's a different feeling of peace and like slower pace, and it kind of calms the it's like a yin and a yang almost. Like it calms the sense of having to look at everything, you know? I don't know if I'm articulating that clearly, but that's how it feels.
Yeah, no, you're articulating it perfectly. Yeah. No, I think this is actually really inspiring for anyone who's an Enneagram 7 to hear this because um, that the fact that you say peace, and I love that you use that word peace because I believe that's something that is unfortunately very rare for an Enneagram 7 to experience um, because of that more of the chaotic energy of go here, I got to do this, I got to do this. Like, when I've studied you Enneagram 7s, coached a lot of you Enneagram 7s, um, had friendships with a lot of you Enneagram 7s, and hearing like what goes on in your minds of like you'll be watching a movie and you'll be thinking, oh, but I could be reading this book. Oh, I need to be cleaning the garage. Oh, I need to be doing this, blah, 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 blah. It's like this constant. So for you to be able just to shut down that monkey mind, to be able to be present and to have that peace, it is the goal. It is the goal. And you're giving other Enneagram 7s hope. And it's a good reminder of you that you can do it. And in fact, this is something that I want to show off with understand.me. Notice what Maria said about ideas, like constantly ideas. Well, this is also your second strength, which is ideation, which
Yeah.
goes along again with being an Enneagram 7 too. And it matches being an ENFP because ENFPs are known like in meetings. If you have an ENFP in a meeting and you're like, let's brainstorm, ENFPs are like, yeah, let's brainstorm.
Yeah.
Whereas us introverts are like, I don't want to brainstorm with a group of people, but if you send me home to come up with some ideas and then come back, but to put me in the hot seat in front of other people, it's like that meme where they're like showing we're going to do the icebreakers and everyone's going to go around and say something about themselves, and it shows the introverts like sweating profusely, right? But you, like your second strength is ideation.
Yeah.
And ideation, your like brain can't help it. Like you're just like it's like popcorn. Like you're just constantly coming up with ideas, just constantly, right?
That's absolutely accurate.
Yes, yes. But what's beautiful about ideation and having it, like one of the things that I am studying and practicing and putting together with reading these profiles is you have connectedness with ideation. So connectedness is like, I would say connectedness is probably one of the most spiritual strengths out of all the strengths. What do
Really?
I mean by that?
Yeah, what do
Yeah.
you mean?
It's the most holistic because it's
Mhm.
like, it's the most humanitarian because it's like connectedness is seeing how, did you ever see that movie Crash when it came out?
Maybe.
Another movie where it was like, it showed like all these different people and like stuff happening, and it was like all
Oh, yes,
these
it was
different
like
walks.
Matt Dillon and
Yes,
yes, I
yes,
know the one you're talking about. It's
yes.
a great movie.
And then it shows how they were like all interconnected at the end.
Yes,
You know, that's like connectedness. I just got goosebumps. Like it's like it
yes,
just shows how we think we're separate, but we're not. Like, so people who have the strength of connectedness, they see the humanitarian. And I've heard you go off. Like I've heard you on sessions. Like this is where you really, people who have connectedness, you really value humanity. You value the big picture. Do you remember when We Are the World song came out? Musicians. So that is like someone with connectedness came up with that idea.
okay.
Like we need to create a song like We Are the World, right?
Mhm.
I won't sing. But so so someone who has ideation with connectedness, like, oh my gosh, what what ideas you must constantly come up with for our world, right? Like your big ideas. You just must come up with the biggest ideas. Then, so like, an ideation is what's interesting is both ideation and strategic. So you have two very different types of strengths right next to each other that both ask the question, what if, but in very different ways. So ideation asks, what if, like imagine it, like imagination. What if we did this? But it's like no plan. Like, Maria, what if you and I just went to Switzerland and we rode one of those, like I always wanted to ride one of those like train, not like a train, but like one of those cart things through the hills of Switzerland. What if we just did that? What if, what if, and that's ideation, right? Whereas strategic is, I like, we have an outcome of, let's say you're helping me with my team and I want to do an event, and there's this very specific outcome that I want to achieve, and you're going to put on your strategic. Well, what if you do this strategy, like this action, you take this action plan to create the result you want for your event. So the strategic what if is knowing the game plan. So people who have the strategic strength, something that I've learned in StrengthsFinder, and I don't have strategic in my top 10. So it's so fascinating because people like you who have strategic in their strengths, you literally think differently than people like me who don't have it. Like it's a different way of thinking, and it cannot be taught. And it's so important for people to get that. Like, you have a distinctive way of thinking. Your brain is constantly thinking like a chess game. Well, if I do this, then that's going to happen, then that's going to happen. And the biggest thing that I've heard of, and I'm curious to get your feedback, is people with strategic, they think that other people think like them. And guess what? We don't. And it comes so natural to you that when you see the like what needs to be done, it's like you download the map and you're like, oh, we need to do A, B, C, D, and you see the game plan. And then you don't understand why the rest of us don't.
Well, you know what's so funny about what you're saying, and I gotta just say, like, I said at the open, like if you're listening and not watching, I would highly recommend trying to get on YouTube and watch this video because you can see the visuals that we're talking about. But um, that is the power, first of all, of understand that me, that all of these, all of these assessments and all of the things that you're breaking down, I have seen through this, again, the interconnectedness of all of them. That's number one. But number two, what you just said about the strategic and that me thinking that, everybody like thinks that way, kind of, yes. But I think it's also what I've noticed is that when I go places, I can kind of see and assess, like I made a comment the other day, like I can't even go for a cup of coffee, like, because if the service is bad, I kind of am immediately diagnosing and seeing all of the things like, okay, this has to happen, this has to happen, this has to happen. And then things that they could do, like in that moment, that would change it all. I do. And I thought that was a product of my expertise and like my experience more than a natural strength. Because again, I thought everybody had the potential to do that. But now that you're saying this, it's making a lot of sense of that is how my brain works. But I think what's interesting is having the big picture and then having the strategic is not just, or and having the ideation or whatever. Like I know that's big picture, and there's a lot of things that were in a lot of the assessments that pointed to that. But then that's ultimately what helps to kind of have the game plan instead of just wouldn't it be nice or what if we, or and it never comes to fruition. So that's really interesting.
Yeah, yeah. I love that visual of you like walking into like a Starbucks or coffee place and you being like, "Brrr." It's like when they show like Matt Bourne or something when they're
Yeah,
like,
oh my God, I was gonna say that. I was gonna say it was like Matthew Bourne, like dint and singing all that.
and
Yes.
you're like, and trust me, the rest of us, or I shouldn't say the rest of us, I'll speak for myself, Maria. I'd be like, no, no, that is not. I could take all the trainings, I could read all. It's never going to happen. Like my brain doesn't do that. And no, no, like I still get lost even using what's it called, GPS. I still get lost, and like and when it comes to um seeing how things can be able to be improved and being able to figure out what is the next steps. Now here's what's really beautiful, and I was like, wow, looking at your strengths, I have to say, this is definitely confirmation that you're doing what you're supposed to do. Um, it's always awkward for me, I have to say, as a coach, when I'm looking at someone's profile and I know what their business is or their job is, and I'm like, oh, it doesn't seem like it's a match. and I gently am like, are you happy? Is it fulfilling? But for you, it's clear that you are designed to go in and help companies and help teams because you see the big picture with the connectedness. And also, people with connectedness, they treat everybody as an equal. I won't name his name, but there's someone that everyone is like liking, and I don't get it at all because I can't stand this guy. But he talks about hierarchy people. He talks about people that are better, like people that are on the hierarchy and people that are below. And I'm like, are you kidding me? And and how like what you need to do, and how to treat people differently that are on the lower pendulum and the higher class and everything. And I'm like, oh my God, I cannot believe people are listening to this guy. But people like you with connectedness, they treat everybody the same. So whether you are the CEO or the janitor, it doesn't matter. Like people with connectedness, they see how everybody matters and how everybody is treated as an equal. And so like you going into teams, you are like you are going to see the big picture, and you're going to be able, and that's why it's a relational strength too, is because people with connectedness can literally connect with anybody because they see how every single person matters. And unlike this guy that I won't name, he thinks that there's people that matter. I guarantee you he doesn't have connectedness in his top 5 or top 10, because he thinks that certain people matter more than other people. But people with connectedness, they see how there isn't such a thing, that everybody matters. And then you combine that with your ideation and strategic, then we're just going to add what's going to make people fall in love with you and just want you around all the time is this shot of positivity, right? Which matches, this is what I love about understand.me, which matches being an Enneagram 7, which matches being an ENFP, which matches being a high I. Like it all matches. Do you see how like all this is like validating?
Yeah. And the interconnectedness of all of these. So that's so powerful.
Yes. So do you have any questions? I feel like I could just constantly geek out on your.
I know. All of this is so rich. I mean, I think more my questions would be to help people understand who are watching or listening, why taking all of these, because I know like a lot of people who've been exposed to assessments kind of, gravitate towards one. Why taking them all? Obviously, we're hopefully illustrating that here, but why taking them all really gives the depth of understanding yourself from lots. I look at it as multidimensional, right? Like just different perspectives. It's all you, but looking at it and assessing it in all different ways and seeing the themes that run across them. But could you kind of make that statement before you go into this love languages one?
Yes, yes. So, well, you kind of answered it for me. So thank you, because you kind of
Okay.
answered the interconnectedness. So I love that. But I would say like they each do something different.
Mm,
So like the DI, like if I didn't know you and let's say this was going to be a coaching session and I didn't know you, I would know I would need to get right to the point, right? Like notice like even this interview, you were like, let's begin. Like that was, it was like you were ready, right? So it's like that tells me something. Whereas I have met like Enneagram 7s who are SIs. Like just because you're an Enneagram 7 doesn't mean you're going to be a D, right? And so just because you're an Enneagram 7 doesn't mean that I'm going to need to get right to the point, right? So the disc tells me how to communicate to you, right? And and I know a lot of DIs who are utility driven, not impact driven. So that doesn't necessarily mean that like you're going to, so you're a DI. Now I know I need to get to the point. Now, if I'm coaching you, I need to know what's driving you. None of these really tell me what's in your heart more than the values. So, like, if you're not happy, especially like if I'm your coach or if I'm hiring you or if I'm in a relationship with you in any sort of way, like if you are someone I care about, period, professionally or personally, I need to know what's in your heart. You want to know what's in someone's heart? You got to know what they value. That is like the fact that we don't know what, like it's so fascinating to me. If I may get on a short little rant here, permission to rant.
yes, yes. Permission granted.
Uh, the fact that we are so advanced in technology, but we don't even know what the people in our lives where we would be devastated if they died. Devastated. The people in your life where you would just drop to your knees and you would just be so devastated if they died today. Do you know what they value? Do you know what they value? If you don't, why not? It's because our culture is sick. Our culture is sick because our culture doesn't have us pay attention to what matters. And what matters is what we value and what our loved ones value. You really want to deepen the quality of your relationships. It's impossible to do it until you know what someone values. So I don't know what's in your heart until I know what you value. And there's no assessment that can compete with that. So that is really key. The Myers-Briggs, there's no other assessment that's like that. I mean, I love looking at this, especially like the percentages. Like, yeah, you're a DI, but I've known other DIs that are actually kind of more on the introverted scale, or they might be actually more thinkers. It kind of throws me off. So the Myers-Briggs tells me a lot that the DISC can't tell me. So the Myers-Briggs tells me, wow, she definitely is an extrovert. And the A down here, so they added this recently. This A, I'm a T, I'm turbulent. So you would be better in like a crisis than I would be. um, but I would help prevent the crisis better than you would. Okay, so I'm going to help prevent the crisis better, but you would be better if the crisis happened. Isn't that funny? Um, because A's are better under pressure and they're better at staying calm under stress, right? Like it's all good, like it's gonna be okay. Whereas us T's, we're we're like preparing for the worst. We're like, well, what if this happens? What if that happens? And then when the crisis hits, we tend to be the ones that are like, uh-oh, right? So there's pros and cons to both. They're not better or worse than, but that's something that none of the others let me know, right?
Yeah, that's
Um,
really interesting.
isn't that really interesting?
Mhm.
Um, and then we know like there's nothing like Enneagram. There's nothing like Enneagram. I mean, Enneagram goes so deep into like the childhood wound. D doesn't go into the childhood wound. Myers-Briggs doesn't go in the child. None of them go in the childhood wound. It goes in the childhood wound, and it shows me what you look like when you're stressed and what you look like when you're healthy. What you need to work on. Like since you're a 7-wing 8 as your coach, I know you need to work on the 6. So I got like a cheater's tool here. I know exactly what to work on in our coaching. None of these others tell me that, right? So they each have like their own superpower. And then we got strengths. This is like your this is, and if I may say, this is like your like the movie Jumanji. I look at strengths like in Jumanji when they have like their screen show up of like their superpowers. Like this is like Maria's superpowers, connectedness. She is going to she's going to see the big picture of, you know, basically how to save humanity, Maria, no pressure. Um, the big picture of that. She's going to come up with all the ideas, right? She's going to know how to create the game plan, but you can't be the one to execute it, right? So just like Jumanji, how they realized they had to work together, they had to have a team, because you're the one that comes up with the vision. You're the one that even can come up with the plan, but you're not the executor. You do have a ranger, which is an executing strength, but it's like more of a flexible executing strength. You're more of the big picture one, right? So that doesn't none of these others tell me any of that. I would have to find that out through strength. So it's like they all have this unique insight that they give about you that the others don't. And
And
then
I would also say, I'm sorry, I just wanted to say this.
oh
I
no,
would
please
also
go ahead.
say that, from a coaching perspective, this is giving you insight into, your clients, right? And understanding them. But you said it before, but just to reiterate that, in any kind of relational arrangement, whether that's in a team, like knowing this about my team members, knowing their strengths, right? And knowing kind of what drives them and their values and knowing their disc, how they communicate, this all goes to those insights beyond them knowing themselves then, right? Providing that. There's so much value in so many different areas. And then obviously in personal relationships, understanding who we are and understanding who the other people in our relationship, or the person in our relationship is, whether that's, spouse, partner, child, even parent, child, like this all has so much power to give the insight and help to understand why we are the way we are and what we need and how that might be different.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I feel like the biggest pain, I know you've experienced pain. Um, I know Enneagram sevens don't like to talk about pain, but I'm going to bring it up, and I promise we won't stay on it. But
Okay.
uh, but I've experienced physical pain. I've experienced financial pain. I've experienced relationship pain. Tell me if you agree with this, Maria. I don't think there's a worse pain than relationship pain because it affects every other area of your life like nothing else.
Very true. Totally agree.
Right. And I believe one of the reasons is because we don't know who the heck we are. We don't understand ourselves. And we haven't had, and it's not our fault, it's because we haven't had the bandwidth. We haven't been in the conversation about it. So how am I going to understand you if I have no idea who I am? It's not going to be possible. We don't have a shot, right? So this increases the shot of compassion because compassion is understanding each other's pain, is understanding each other's suffering, and so think it's really beautiful. It's really powerful. And I love that you bring that up because as you very well know, um, you've worked with so many leaders. I'm curious, I'm going to ask you the question now. How many leaders and how many, CEOs and how many business owners actually like really take the time and know their team?
Sadly, the majority don't take the time and know their team and on any level. That's why I say that. Like it could be transformational to be able to understand one another, right? And team understand the leader as well. Like I think that can be powerful as well. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really, it's well, and it always goes back to values. That's what it is. And so it always goes back. So it's once utility people see the value in this, that's what's going to change. When utility people see how this can actually help them make more money, then we're going to see a change. And so that's what gives me hope. And so for someone like you, and like I'm saving the best for last. I love, 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 love languages. And by the way, I do want to say your love languages can change. If you have a significant emotional event, your love languages can change. It's rare, but it does happen. Um, so your number one love language is acts of service, and then it's words of affirmation. So I bet like if someone, you know, does an act of service for you and then, you know, has a sincere, genuine compliment or sincere, genuine, you know, insight that, you believe because you're also a Heidi and you're a 7 wing 8. I mean, no one wants to hear someone just give them a compliment to give them a compliment. I remember I was part of a culture where everyone said, you rock. And then after hearing it, it was like, okay, I don't need to hear that anymore. Right. Cause it's like, I don't believe you and it doesn't mean anything. Um, but you definitely need to have that sincere words of affirmation, but acts of service, like my dad is acts of service. So it's like, I can tell that my dad is not words of affirmation. I'm words of affirmation. So I know that I've learned with love languages is that to show my dad that I love him is I'll do acts of service with him. And I know that then he knows that I love him because my dad won't say, I love you. And it used to bother me because I'm words of affirmation. But then studying the love languages, I was like, oh, he comes from that generation. It's weird for him, right? I say, I love you, dad, on the phone. And he's like, okay, it's like awkward, you know? And it's just because, and I know that he loves me. There's no doubt in my mind. But that's why the love languages are so important. So we don't make up stories that aren't true about our loved ones. So do you see how acts of service show up in your life?
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
I do.
Yeah. Do you see how, like, have certain people in your life, have you felt more love from certain people because they've done acts of service?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And then, obviously, and then words of affirmation is also very important to you. That's also really high,
Yeah, that
so.
resonated a lot with me in all types of relationships.
Mhm, mhm. And so it's the most fascinating thing I found when interviewing, because I interviewed 5 love language experts. The most fascinating thing I found is how resistant most of us are in giving the love language that is not in our top 2, because it just feels unnatural, right? Like, but if you really get, this is how they receive love. And like, if you finally get that, like, I was resistant, like, I wanted my dad to say that he loved me, And then when I finally got, oh, like, Mandy, do you believe your dad loves you? Absolutely. So I could either A, be stubborn about this, or B, accept it and then realize I can show my dad that I love him through acts of service. Right. And so it's interesting because I have heard him say it a couple of times. Like, it's not a lot, but he has said it. I'm not as attached to it now, but I do find that the more that we start to practice giving the love language to the other person who that's the love language they need, and it's not our top 2, it does increase the probability. It doesn't guarantee it, but it increases the probability that we'll get our love language back.
That makes sense. That makes sense.
Right?
Yeah.
Right? And so this is also really important just in all sort of relationships, you know? And guess what? This is really important for your self-love. Dun, dun, dun. So it's like acts of service for Maria. You want to show Maria that you love her, you do acts of service.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
And words of affirmation, positive self-talk, right?
Exactly. Exactly. Words of affirmation, positive self-talk. And I bet you could come up with so many ideas on how you could show Maria,
Yes.
with ideation.
You're showing
There's
the
no.
connected, you're showing how it's connected to the strengths.
Yes. Like, so many ideas. So
Yeah.
many ideas.
Yeah.
I love it. Any other
That's
questions, Maria?
awesome. No, I have totally enjoyed this. I've gotten such clarity on my own personality, and really, again, like the power here that I have just not been able to leverage, I guess, is the fact that this profile gives you all of them in one place to really see the connection and how the themes that come out and the different kind of angles or points of view or however you want to state it. The power, like, this is so powerful. So what I want to encourage everyone to do is to go on. Is that Understand.me available for everyone to use?
Yeah. Yeah,
So we're
absolutely.
going to put in the show notes, Understand.me, the link to it, and to get a profile and be able to take the assessments and start your own profile. What I also love is that then once you have that profile, you can share that with others. So you can share it with your team members. Your team members could share it with you. You could share it with your partner, your spouse, your friends, your business partners, whomever. I think there's so much value in that. And I really, really have loved this breakdown, Mandy. We're going to be talking about this again, I'm sure. But I
Yes.
really appreciated the time and all of the insight. And for those of you listening, hope you can get to see the video for this, because then you'll actually be able to see the reports that Mandy was showing on screen. But if not, certainly go to understand.me and take them yourself, and it will give you so much power and so many insights. And I really appreciate this session. Thanks for being here.
I had a blast, Maria. Thanks for being the guinea pig. I love this conversation. I love and respect and adore you. So I had so much fun. Thanks for playing.
Thank you. I do as well. I love you, and I certainly have the same respect and admiration for you and all your knowledge and your willingness to share that, not only with me, but with everybody on this podcast, listening to this podcast. So thank you so much.
Yay.
That's all for today. Hope to see you guys next time on the next episode of Finding the Upside. Bye for now.